Your men can have love for the truckie. Beautiful minds, but we love getting ugly. Risk takers with a clover, man, we love getting lucky. You run, we chase fire, I love when it ducks me. Tones go off, house watch, read the address out. 1075, get up off the magic couch. 500 gallons prepared for the baddest drought. Who else you want on the way when disaster's out? Can't even get a little bit rattled when you enter with exit apparel. Mayday, member down, they'll drag you. You won't get this from every Tom, Dick, and Harold, but here's a view from the top floor with Mickey Farrell.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of A View from the Top Floor. Today's episode, it's a good one. I'll leave it at that. Florida State Senator Jay Collins, retired Green Beret, Bronze Star winner, Purple Heart, retired First Sergeant out of the United States Army. This guy is the real deal. This conversation, we start with just pretty much how America's soft. And with America getting softer and softer as time goes and progresses, it's ultimately trickling into our fire service, our police forces, into the military, and ultimately the nation in general. And we talk about humility, we talk about being all in, and we talk about what it means to be a patriot, and to understand that when you're in the business of serving, whether it's the nation or your local community, we have to remember that it is so much bigger than you as an individual. That's exactly what Jay Collins brings to the table. His story is remarkable, and I know you're going to really, really enjoy this, okay? So thanks for tuning in, and here we go. Jay Collins, retired Green Beret, Florida State Senate. So, Jay, let me ask you something. What has given you the motivation to give your life to service? I mean, you started in the military. You did 23 years active duty, and we'll get into that. But moving on to that, with politics and your passion for that, I mean, your whole life has been about giving to other people. So where does that come from?
So, I think like most people, it comes from the home, right? I was adopted by my grandparents. They instilled in me being part of something bigger than yourself. I grew up as a farm kid, and no one's upbringing is perfect. We had our own problems to overcome, but they showed me love. They brought me in, they adopted me, and ultimately put me on a path towards a lot of great things. But my grandfather, my dad, used to talk about serving in World War II and the brotherhood and that camaraderie. That really hit me. And, I went off to college for a couple of years, and it just wasn't time. I wasn't quite ready, and I knew I wanted to join the military. I joined, I fell in love with it, and I kept doing it. When it comes to what I do in the Senate, I never would have imagined that politics would be in my future. It really wasn't something that I had planned on. But I arrived at a position and a point where I saw no other option. If good people don't step in and we don't get people who understand really what's at stake, nothing's going to change. I had this moment where it was just a clear realization. I was willing to deploy to a nation that wasn't mine, to fight beside people I didn't know in a foreign land, to protect and preserve what we value here. Why would I not do all that I could right here at home? The first lesson I learned as a Green Beret was to always leave things better than you got it. And all of those facts really led me to where I'm at. If I can leave it great, and my children could be the ones who change the world, make our family, something that I can't even dream of, man. What an absolute win as a dad. What an absolute win is just someone trying to leave things better for my kids.
Yeah, it's something you said, which I think we're losing with, I don't know if it's the next generation, but just with society, is how when you commit to serving the public on any level, from the volunteer fire world to police,
right,
to military, to special ops, whatever it may be, it is so much bigger than you as an individual. And I think we're losing that.
That's right.
And I think that comes from a lot of it. I know you were a football player, right? And that was your first love before the military. And I think that we're losing children playing sports every day. And I think that is where ultimately moving into what we do and what you've done, I think I can see it firsthand with, like, we don't have that teamwork or that understanding that it really is bigger than just you and that it does take a team. Now, I know, obviously, from football to the military, could you see the parallels, especially as a Green Beret, as having that football background?
Yeah, honestly, that's exactly it. I've said it probably hundreds of times at this point in the campaign trail. All the things I learned as a Green Beret, the vast majority of them I had already learned playing football. Coaches put it in my ear. My parents told me these things. My coaches retrued it and explained it in their way. I learned it, I played it, and then I joined the military and I came into a very much a team dynamic. But to your point, man, my kids have the same thing we used to say when I was a young private in the Army: teamwork makes the dream work, right?
Yeah.
It takes many people doing any number of things to be successful. You know, when I was a Green Beret and when you worked at some of these other units, you had the operators, you had the trigger pullers, but you had so many people that really enabled and empowered those people on the objective to do their job. You couldn't do anything if you didn't have logistics and intelligence and all the operation and staff support to get you there, to get the support structure and to solve these problems. Ultimately, we each had our role. But to your point, that is something we've lost. Competition drives excellence, right? You have to learn how to win. You have to learn how to lose. And that's so important, man. You got to learn how to get back up. But it's your teammates to your left and right that really help bake in that resiliency. And yeah, man, we got to get back to that as a country and as families.
So you say we have to learn to win and lose. So in the Green Berets, during your training and through your deployments, how did you build that trust amongst one another? Because when you talk basic sports analogy, when you're children, little league and pee wee football, it's like you're going and you're accountable, because when you go back to school the next day, if you didn't do the right thing, the guys are going to let you know. And that's how at a young age you build the trust. Today we call it bullying, I guess, but I think that was kind of, you held yourself accountable to do the right thing. And if you didn't, you heard about it. In my job as a firefighter, you learn that trust on the fire floor, but you also learn it through training. Now, on the highest level of special ops, how do you guys build that trust?
So I think a lot of this goes back to the same dynamic, man. Remember Hell Week as a football player, right? You went out there, you were bleeding, you were sweating, you were breaking your body down, but you built those bonds under adverse circumstances. It's the same way in the military, the same way in law enforcement and the fire response, right? As firefighters, man, you build this commonality. We used to joke and say, embrace the suck, right?
Yeah.
But honestly, man, the suck is the catalyst. It's what's driving this bond, that commonality. No matter who you talk to in the military, you have a commonality of basic training and whatever your advanced training was. You overcame that. The whole concept of the military is out of many, it's one. We are the United States Army. We are the DOD. We're the U.S. military. We break you down and build you back up into something bigger, stronger, and more capable. But those commonalities of capability and thought process that have to be put in there. And it's the same way in the military and teams. It's the same way in law enforcement and as a firefighter. You've got to rebuild those people. But man, that's how the brotherhood's built. The other piece is accountability. And I was accountable to my teammates. I was accountable to every member of my formation that came before me. The history of the Green Berets, if you don't think that weighs on your shoulders in everything you do, I'm not going to embarrass me. I'm not going to embarrass my family, and I'm not going to embarrass my regiment. Oddly, that's one of the things that when I jumped into politics, I had a big discussion about. Man, I was very hesitant to talk about myself as a Green Beret. I was very hesitant to use anything associated with me as a Green Beret because I didn't want to speak for them. But we came to this notion in talking to senior leadership. They're like, look, we don't do a very good job of communicating our experiences. We believe we are the quiet professionals, but in reality, most of us have been very silent. We have been silent and not shared anything we've learned. All of the lessons don't come to bear unless someone asks a question and it goes in a study. So when you're quiet, frankly, people listen to you. They hear your voice. It's out there. But as a silent person, people speak for you. And I think, honestly, we failed a lot of our folks because of it. Knowing that difference is so vital and so key. And if you look at the problems associated with those of us who get into stressful situations in our day jobs, that's a key differentiator in this process. And it's some of the gaps we deal with daily.
Everything you just said really, really parallels the basics of the fire service. Now, you're speaking about the national level of politics and state senate, but history and legacy, I think those are two things that we're losing in the next generation coming into the roles of leadership because people want to change what that was. And you can't change history. You can't change what we've done in the past that made us who we are, that made the Green Berets the Green Berets. And for me, made New York City Fire Department, the FDNY. I mean, there's so much
Absolutely.
behind that. And I really think that we're doing a disservice by not teaching the history and the legacy of what that's about. And then what you said, quiet professional, this is something I struggle with, is the best ones don't speak about it usually, right? And they're the ones that should be telling the story, passing on those traditions, passing on the knowledge of the front lines. And I think that with social media, we've changed it to a point, we've pivoted, and we're starting to progress to share some of the messages, but it also opened up a platform for so many that should not be sharing some of these experiences. Do you see that in the politic world, or do you see it more so in the military world, or is that something that affects your life?
Yeah, no, we see that in every walk of life, right?
Yeah.
You know, let's go back to what I mentioned before. I was very concerned. I didn't want to speak for my regiment. I didn't want to speak for the heraldry of who we were, man. The amount of just frankly amazing human beings that we've buried far too soon because of what they did, man. I remember them as people. I remember their faces. I can think about their families. And I don't want to sully their reputation. But it actually took a couple of senior leaders who were like, Jay, you know, you're a smart guy, but sometimes you're kind of a dumbass. You still haven't got it, right? And they kind of brought me back to reality. And they're like, look, you're out there working. You lost your leg. You overcame those things. You kept fighting. You wanted to stay active duty as a Green Beret. You earned your place back in the tribe. That's our story, man. You represent our people the right way. We don't expect you to be perfect. We expect you to do the very best job you can in telling our story and showing the world what we're about as a regiment. But you know, it's the same way with the nation, man. Look out there. Look at what's going on. America stands for something. We truly do. In the heraldry of history, if you want to look at it that way, there is nothing else like the experiment that we got to grow up in. You know, the ideas, those ideals, those principles, those things that make America what it is and our people who they are so unique. They separate us from every other nation. You know, the out of many, one concept is so unique. You came from all these places and you made one great nation. And somehow, and if you look at all of the problems that we deal with, I think a lot of it comes down to this. We should be proud of who we are. Yes, we made mistakes. Yes, there are things we could have done better, but look at how much good we've done. Look at what the United States stands for. Look at all of the great things associated with us. You have to learn from the negative. You can't forget those things, and you don't tear those things down, man. We have to remind ourselves there, and we have to own those. We have to apply those lessons daily. But in the end, we're doing that so our children and our children's children don't have to make the same mistakes. Those people who do this are dooming future generations to have to repeat the same mistakes, the ones we've overcome, and it's heartbreaking. You know, if you look at politics, I think you see a lot of cycling between the same things we're talking about here. And let's talk about fire response and first responders. And this is something near and dear to my heart, man, because when I was in the military, we went through some really incredibly stressful times with all these years of war. You know, it was ripping families apart. It was ripping people apart. You were deployed. You saw things that, frankly, nobody wanted to see. I've talked to so many firefighters and so many cops and law enforcement who have just seen things that they can't unsee. And there's this feeling that I have to be strong and I can't be weak and I can't admit that I have a problem. These things are breaking me apart. Man, it is the humanity of who we are as people where all of this just becomes an issue. It is 100% okay to not be okay. I am so tired of burying good people who take their own life, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's fire response, or whether it's the military. Man, guys, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to say you need help. And we got to look out for those people around us. And that is especially is where this quiet and silent thing comes to bear, because it's putting good people in the ground, and we can't let this keep going.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, I think that the mental health aspect of what you're speaking about, there's so much truth to that. And it's so very, very real. I think that with police and fire, where it's a little different than maybe the military, is that we can't turn it off in the sense where
Right.
we're not being deployed and then having to come home and then rebuild your life, which is something I want to talk about that transformation coming from going on a deployment and then coming back to reality. For me, I work 24-hour shifts. That reality is that drive home, and then it's boom, you in, and then the kids are hanging on you, and then you haven't really dismissed everything. It just happened. I mean, it doesn't have to be all death and bad things, but it's a stressful environment, and just
Mm-hmm.
operating at your absolute peak performance under stress, that takes its toll on you. And then coming back, and then all of a sudden playing dad, it's hard. And I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's something like you said. We can't be silent about it. We have to talk about those moments. I think it's funny how you just said, like, you didn't want to, not embarrass, but speak for the regiment of the Green Berets, and then they come back and say, well, you're the best guy to do it. And, like, your story is so remarkable. And there's so much to it in the fact that you kept pushing, even when the cards were against you. And we'll get into that in a moment, but I want to bring it back because today, 23 years ago, you were in jump school, right?
Yep.
And that story to me, and I heard it on a previous podcast, was it's pretty crazy. So you're in jump school, and I'll let you tell the story, but then I want to talk to you about from September 10th, jump school, to September 11th, the next day.
Yeah. So September 10th, man, it was my very first jump. No matter what anybody tells you, that first jump out of an airplane, it catches you just a little bit different. No matter how you prepare yourself mentally, there's something just a little bit off about being strapped to an airplane with a little cloth strap and walking out with a bunch of your finest friends in military uniform and smashing into the earth and getting back up to do it again. I was pretty excited, man. My parachute opened, I hit the dirt, and I was able to get back up. So I was like, hey, big win for the team, right? And, none of us on the evening of September 10th had any inkling of what was to come. It was just another day. It was just another day. We were going to go jump, and we were focused on whatever we needed to do to go knock out a couple of jumps the next day. And, man, September 11th, it just hits differently. And to the point of this, I was in jump school. We got up at ODARC 30. We loaded into cattle cars and everything. We went down there. We loaded in an airplane, and we took off at the crack of dawn, and we were going to go jump. And we flew and flew and flew. They stood us down, saying there's no jump, no pass, no pass. And we had no clue. They didn't relay any information in the plane. And, you just keep going in this vomit comet out there in the hot Georgia sun, man, until finally you run out of fuel. And we had no idea that they were grounding planes, that you couldn't take off, you couldn't land, and what was going on. They landed us, they put us there on the ground, and they didn't get us out of the plane. So you shouldn't leave kids in a car in the summer with it turned off. You shouldn't leave paratroopers in a plane with it turned off either in the hot Georgia sun, it turns out. But it was unprecedented times. And they brought us out and set us on the tarmac, and we started to hear rumors, and we're like, nah, it's crazy. And it didn't really hit us, and nobody really explained it to us until we got back to the barracks. And we saw the TV. Remember those TVs from when we were kids? They'd roll them out there on that crappy little stand.
Yeah.
Well, they rolled them out there on the rocks at Fort Benning, Georgia. And, how do you describe it? And how do you just process everything you just saw? At its root, man, we knew that we were going from a nation of peace to a nation of war instantly. We knew everything in our life was going to change. Some people got pulled out of the jump school that day and went back off to wherever they were going to go and to do whatever their unit needed them to do. Others like me, I got to finish, and a couple days later we jumped again, and we wrapped up our first 5 jumps, and we went back to our unit. But man, the world changed. And, I think a point we don't talk about enough is the baton that was passed from New York to all of our military branches. Man, I'll tell you what, every time I go to New York and we see the memorial, and every time we go to D.C. and we see the Capitol and you see all that is there, man, it hits just a little bit harder. Innocent civilians got up to go do work, unaware of everything that was going to happen that day, and they lost their lives. They gave up everything unknowingly. But the good story is people like you, cops and firefighters, average everyday civilians ran into it and rescued people and made a difference and saved lives. And again, that's all that's good in America, man. That is what we're fighting for. That is our values. That is who we are. And that baton that day became a catalyst, and it got passed off to our military, and we got to take the fight forward. And none of us expected it to be 20 years of war, I can promise you. But, if you go back to it, I would make all the same decisions, because what happened that day and what you and your brothers and your sisters went through all day and twice on Sunday, man, we'd be there for you guys.
No,
for our nation.
Thank you. And, something that's not spoken about September 11th in that morning, that it truly was the ultimate rescue. I mean, there was more lives saved that day than any other rescue in the history of rescues. Yeah. So, yes, it was a horrible day, and we lost a number of firefighters that they can't even wrap your brain around still. But there was a great work done that day, and there were tremendous people rescued. So that moment when September 10th, you're fired up, you're in jump school, going to be a Green Beret, you live in the dream, peacetime. September 11th, the next day, still fired up, trying to piece things together. Why doesn't today feel like yesterday? And then you realize the nation's at war. Where was your mind in that moment? Like, was that like, let's fucking go? Or was it like, holy shit, kind of like a humbling moment?
Well, I think there was kind of a cavalcade of emotions, right? Obviously, as an American, you're like, oh my God, whoever did this has got to pay, right? We're going to hold them accountable, and we're going to bring hell with us, right? We're going to make sure that these people are avenged. And that's how you feel. I mean, that was American blood spilled in our nation on the city that never sleeps, right? I mean, it's heartbreaking. But I'll tell you immediately, I had just gotten married, and my wife lived in D.C. She did 20 years in the military. She was a counterintelligence agent. She was up there, and, back then cell phones weren't really a thing like they are now. I couldn't just call her or text her and get an idea. Phone lines were jammed. She lived in D.C., worked near the Pentagon and downtown and all these areas, and I didn't know if she was okay. First and foremost, I wanted to check on her. People were calling their families, just cycling through calls, trying to check on everybody and anybody, and you take care of that. And then I think you started seeing that resolve baking in, like, hey, this is about to get really real, really fast. And all the things we've been training for, we're going to be put into use here very quickly. I think most of us expected it to be like the Gulf War. You'd be in, you'd be out in under a year, and that sure wasn't the case.
Yeah. So things getting very real very quickly. Can we talk about in 2007 your Afghanistan deployment?
Yeah.
So just tell us about the story, that battle, and just the story is remarkable. So I'll just let you tell it, and then we'll talk about it.
So there's a couple of things in 07. In April of 07, we were on just a movement, right? We were out there doing a presence patrol. We used to jokingly call them a movement to ambush. So we're out there, and they started lighting us up. And what was different, and I remember it still clearly, everybody moved differently. Up until then, it had been a little bit of, popping off rounds, kind of pray and spray, right? And they would run off, and that was it. This was concentrated firepower. These were rounds being collected and people moving and supporting by fire. It was very technically and tactically proficient. And you could see barking of guns and communication across lines that wasn't quite what we were used to, right? So automatically, it's just a different situation. And, I'm on the rear gun of the rear truck. I'm on the 240, and I'm doing my thing. I'm scanning. I'm putting rounds downrange. I'm trying to neutralize the enemy that's in our area. And, in any gunfight, There's kind of an ebb and a flow. It gets fast, it gets slow. The gunfire goes up, it goes down. And I had no idea that anybody had been hit, let alone myself. And as this thing kind of ebbed and flowed, I started slipping on the gun deck, and I had no idea. I really honestly thought it was water or fuel or worst case. And I say this all the time because it lets you know where our mentality was. The thing that I valued the most at that point was the caffeine that those little Rip It cans gave us. Because, man, you're not sleeping a lot, right? Yeah. And although they aren't not great energy drinks, they were better than the water bottles that have been baked in the sun for a year plus, right? It was just something different. And I was worried that maybe our Rip It stash got banged up, right? And it was leaking all over the floor. That's where my mind was. And as we stopped, reflexively, you pop it, you drop it, you put a new can in, you cycle the weapon and make sure you're going to be ready to go in case rounds start popping again. And it's then that you shine a light down and you think, oh, crap, well, it's blood, right? And you go check on everybody, you let them know what's going on, and it's not a them thing, it's a me thing. I'm leaking blood. I've lost about 1 liter. I ended up putting a tourniquet on my arm, cinching it in, and we got back to work, right? Shortly thereafter. But remember, tightening that thing down, I didn't know if we were going to end up in a longer gunfight from there or not. Multiple hours later, I think it was about 3 at that point, we changed this to a pressure dressing and, continued on mission. We ended up having like 5 people injured that day. Some of them were pretty bad. When we got back to the fire base, at this point, I was also the senior medic. So I'm trying to render care to people, and I've got, a little boo-boo here on my arm, if you will. And, I want to take care of them first. So we had taken care of all of this, taken the pressure dressing off. I just had a bandage on it, and we got our people off in a helicopter. I said, no, I'm good. I'll get on the next one if we need to. And there wasn't a next one because it turns out in Afghanistan, you can't really fly in the mountain passes in inclement weather. It causes helicopter crashes, which is really frowned upon at large. So I developed compartment syndrome in my arm, which is not awesome. It's think of it like sausage, right? It's a 3-pound skin, and you're trying to put 5 pounds of blood and everything else inside it. So the overpressure occludes the venous and arterial blood flow, and it starts to impact the nerves. So you end up with a lot of pain, pallor, pulselessness, moving through your arm. And that's what we started to have here. And we knew we were going to have to clean it up, do some work on there. And we ended up doing surgery on my left arm on a fire base in Afghanistan. It's a pretty cool story now. Not it's a great barroom story, man, but it sucked at the time. We did a block on the shoulder, a block on the elbow, not because we expected it to neutralize the pain, but the thought process was as you took the surgical tourniquet off and the blood flow started and everything that was being occluded by the compartment syndrome started to flow again, you would eventually get some of that pushing down in there and help offset the pain. And we scrubbed my left arm. We prepped it for surgery. We got my right arm into a sterile glove, and we prepped it for surgerizing, I guess, to make up a word here, right? Being an active component. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
And it was me, our junior medic, who was, pretty new to the team, and our weapons guy and our engineer all working together on here. So I'm draped, I'm prepped. We've got a sterile field, and we're going to town, man. We opened it up, splayed open my arm here, and got into the inside and popped it open. You got kind of the pressure relief. We debrided some of the tissue that was busted up inside there and got everything kind of cleared up. We did a partial closure and packed it up with a drain, and I ended up going out to a place called Tarrant Cout, or TK, a couple days later and having several other surgeries, and we'll be back on the fire base 30 days later. And honestly, it just seemed like a Tuesday, right? That's just kind of what we do. I know that may seem kind of strange, but I think anybody would do the same thing when the outcome is potentially losing your arm, because it's hard to scratch your back with a hook. And ultimately, I had the tools, I had the training, and you know, that really was a very kinetic trip. Meaning, we're in a lot of gunfights. It was like a 98% tick or troops in contact rate for our ODA, and we were extremely remote. 90, 100 kilometers from the next American. So we're out there in bad guy territory. It was pretty unique.
What I think is crazy is that 30 days later, you're back at it. So that just kind of falls into what we started with talking about the next generation, or I shouldn't say the next generation, but pretty much society in a whole is soft, I feel like. And when you come into jobs like ours, you can't be soft, right? So I see so many people get hurt with bullshit injuries and they drag it out. And again, this comes back to the understanding that service is bigger than yourself. Also understanding where you fit in. So here you are, you're shot, tending to your own wound with a tourniquet. But then when you get back to base, you're making sure that your brothers are okay because that's your job. You're the medic.
That's right.
So understanding where you fit in ultimately is like the most important thing. And that comes all the way back to football, right? And like sports and being a man. And we need to bring that back, or not even bring it back. But we have to celebrate it more often rather than suppress it and fight it and hide it, because we're getting soft as a nation. We're getting soft as a fire service. We're getting soft as a military. And I think that the lessons like you being silent and not sharing that, it's a detriment for the future of everything, of humanity. And I think it's so important that you do tell your story. And I'm so happy you do. I'm sure everyone who listens is so happy to hear it. But then what's crazy is even 30 days, you're back in the field. Then shortly after that, you have an injury to your leg. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So honestly, that was pretty bizarre. So, I'm sure it's the same in the fire service, right? You don't want to be the first to have to experience something, right? That usually means something's gone really, really well or really, really bad. Either way, it's going to be an interesting ride. We were there when they were trying to overrun fire bases in Afghanistan. We were a fire base Anaconda. Yeah, as I told you, it was incredibly remote. And, just to make a very long story, truncate it down and make it a little bit shorter here, we're there and we had been dealing with a lot of gunfights. Like I told you, we were always out. Every time we drove somewhere, we were getting hit. And, at this point, we started hearing stories about people trying to, overrun fire bases. That morning, we had been receiving small arms fire and mortars and rockets and just so much, man. We had horses on our fire base that we've been riding into combat, out there doing patrols on horseback. So we have mules and donkeys and camp dogs, and this is where we're at. And as these things came in, man, it was crazy. Buildings are getting hit, animals are getting hit. They've got entrails out. We're having to go chase down horses to put them down. And I'm up on the ops end, and honestly, I didn't wake up with my leg unattached, right? I got hit by a mortar. I bounced down a big chunk of steps and kind of did the upside down turtle, shook it out, realized everything's attached. I cleared out what was in my body armor. You dumped it out, and you're like, all right, man, I got some shrapnel and got a really splitting headache, and that really sucked. Let's not do that again. And you get back up, you go back up there, and you get to work. And you don't really, man, I didn't focus on the moment. I was just glad I was able to get back up. Everything's attached. My leg's not gone. I'm there. But what I didn't realize is whether it was the fall and the overpressure or the overpressure then the fall, that really set me on a path moving forward that was pretty unique. I had jacked up some bones in my back. Apparently, unbeknownst to me, I'd fractured a little bit of my T-spine, a little spinal processes up there, which caused some issues down the road. And then I'd blown out L2, L3, L4, L5, and S1 in my lower back as all this had gone out. And as I learned later, it caused some overpressure injuries in my leg because of just how close you are, man. Blast propagation isn't a flat line. It's kind of an arc. And, as we go through this story, I'll kind of break it down the best I can. I got back up, we fought, we saved our lives. we killed as many of the enemy as we could, and we fought for our brothers, right, on the fire base. After all this, we wrapped up our trip several months later, and I started having issues with back pain and my foot not doing things. Like I would be running and think my foot's going straight, but it would go left, or it would just do different things. I'm losing control of it. But I'd also been given the opportunity to go to a really interesting organization in the DoD to go try out and go to a selection. So I'm not going to turn that away. So I start training up. I train up. I got my rucksack on. I am breaking it off and going. And in this selection, I started tripping up and down mountains, going up it, going down it. I would tumble down. My rucksack would go with me. You just see, like, I don't understand. At this point, I could run, I could jump, I could shoot, I could do all the things I needed to do fairly well. But now my body's not doing what I expected, and I'm not going to quit. They select us for these traits, so I'm just figuring out a path, right? Like, just don't quit. Keep yourself in the fight. They bumped me out of selection.
Frustrating, right?
What's that?
It's got to be so frustrating. I mean, you're in your peak performance. Like
That's right.
Into combat and back, and now you have this opportunity, and now everything's in line, but your body's not working with your mind.
Well, that's right. And I'm thinking, okay, I just got to push harder. You're being weak. I won't use the same words I was telling myself, and just stop, push harder, do more. And I got bumped. I came back. At that time, they sent us to the schoolhouse after some trips like this. And we were supposed to instruct the next generation. I wasn't quite ready, man. I wanted to keep operating, and I went to selection again. I was given an opportunity and went through, but by this time, it was getting really bad. I was having explosive back pain. There were times when I couldn't stand up straight. There were times when literally my foot would flop and drag, and it wasn't working. So I was taping it. I was trying to figure out ways to keep my boot stiff, but I went off to selection anyway. I ended up getting picked up to come there as a medic, and went to this organization, pretty cool. And it's a surreal story. I remember talking to our physical therapist, Greer, and she, we were talking about my leg and all these things. She said, look at your calf. And it was like a 3-inch atrophy. I had lost 3 inches of muscle volume in my leg. My hamstring was not working right either, so it had dwindled in size, and my reflexes were off. I was starting to have some pitting edema issues, so they were like, hey, this is not good. I just got to this organization, just signed in, and now I'm the broke guy. For the first time in my entire military career, I've been shot and blown up and wasn't the broke guy. But now I get to this place, this organization, which, we dream of. Right, this is your one moment, man. It's like the Eminem song, right? You got one moment. This is it. Don't screw it up. And now I'm the broke guy. And they send me to Walter Reed. They do surgery on my back. They aug it out, a little rotor-rooter here, a little bit of duct tape and chewing gum there. And I come back. I continue to train up, get back on it, and I see an increase in some of the functionality of my leg. The back pain gets a little bit better. But in time, it peaked, and then it continued to drop down, and it got worse and worse and worse, and nobody could figure out why. So literally, I'm going through this really prestigious course called OTC, and I failed. I mean, it still burns to this day.
I'm sure.
I absolutely failed. It embarrasses me, it frustrates me, but in the end, I was put in this place to learn how to fail, I think, in a lot of ways, to learn how to get back up and to realize that maybe sometimes it's okay to not be okay and ask for help. And
I think failure is the greatest motivator.
That's right.
And it's the most understanding when it comes to what we do. If you have a series of mistakes, ultimately in the end, you're that much better. And if you share your mistakes, then collectively, as a company, as a firehouse, as a team, you're that much better in the long run, And I think that comes from owning the humility. And not everyone has that humility, because in our businesses, we're all type A personalities. You have to be to be successful for the most part. At least in combat on the fire floor, I'm sure you have to have that type A personality to survive.
Sure.
So it's hard to admit failure. Not that you've failed, but you didn't win, and you've been winning throughout your career, right?
Yeah, well, and 100%, man. This was a target in front of me. I knew how to knock it down, and I wasn't knocking it down. I was sucking. I was miserable. I was in pain every day, and I knew I wasn't performing up to my standard. But again, I'm not looking at my leg. I'm not going to make an excuse of it. I'm just, all right, man. I've got to do more, eat less, train more, do more. And they dropped me. And something I'm very grateful for is they allowed me to finish my service to that organization, and it put me in a position where I went and I had to learn new skills, using my skills as a Green Beret and some of the other things I'd done at that point, and put it into play on a very unique mission set, which honestly, I think it made a difference what we did. I learned so much about it, but it also put me on the path to figure out what was going on with my leg. I was still running, I was still jumping, I was still shooting, I was still doing demo. I was still doing everything that we need to do because those responsibilities never go away. And I'm holding my own. Eventually, my leg gets worse. I've got the hair's falling out, the toenails have fallen out. I've got pitting edema like an inch thick. My leg is like Mr. Deed's leg. You remember the Adam Sandler movie? Yeah, it's a dead stick, dude. It looks like somebody else's mutated foot. It's just crazy. And I'm in a brace up to my hip. There's a below the knee piece. You put the piece on up here, and it gives me the rigidity I need to function. But I kept breaking those things, man. I would go for a run and I'd break it. I would go fast stroke and I'd break it. I'd go for a jump and I'd break it. And I remember a really bad jump, and it really dawned on me that, okay, this something has got to give. We were coming in, and someone cut above me, and they cut the air off in my chute. So my chute closed, dropped, reinflated, thank God, right? Or the leg doesn't matter a bit, right? It's a whole other story to tell if I live. But chute pops open, and I'm screaming, man. I am just trying to ride this comet in, right? And I'm flaring. I'm getting to where I need to go, and I'm sliding in. The brace breaks. The struts go one way. The carbon fiber goes the other. I bounce on my face, and then I lay there. I'm like, I can't walk, right? Like my legs are wrecked. I'm trying to put it all together. You get up and you realize, all right, man. And I wanted to cut my leg off for a while, to be honest with you. At this point, I'm like, I see people who lost their leg. They're out there running marathons. They're out there doing these amazing things. And I can't do my job. I feel like I'm failing. I'm broken, and I'm in pain all the time. And the Army wasn't at the position where they were ready to do that. They thought there was other things we could do, and it was just going back and forth. And the unit made a decision saying, hey, look, you need to stop. It's time to take a knee, go retire. And by this point, the pain was killing me. They put in a spinal stimulator. But thank God this organization sent me to the Mayo Clinic. The Mayo Clinic looked at this differently. Up until that point, it was a focus on my back, the spine. This is an autonomic nervous system issue. Your back injury caused nerve damage down your leg. That's what we're overcoming. Let's do more back surgery. Let's go clean the nerves in your leg. In reality, yes, that was part of it. Perhaps it was a circumstance, but there was also vascular compromise and lymphatic compromise that had been untreated. And the pain that I was feeling was ischemic pain. It was a tissue dying, and I'm not going to blame the medical system. I'm going to hold the accountability, a lot of it, with myself, frankly, because I was kind of a big dumb animal, right? I mean, we are who we are. I was not going to lose my moment, man. I dreamt of being in this position and earning my place in this tribe. All I ever wanted to be was a shooter, right? And all I ever wanted to do was retire as a command sergeant major, and I was not going to walk away and fail at this. But, it wasn't my plan then. It's not my plan now. It's his plan, and we have to understand that. And I really believe that I had to learn to get back up. I had to learn to fail. I had to learn that it was okay to accept help and not be okay. And to your point, you said earlier, it motivates you. Failure and fear of failure motivates you. I will tell you what, man, when I woke up 4 days after they cut my leg off without pain, like I've been experiencing for the first time in, and it had been years at that point, it was a whole new world, man. It wasn't if I was going to requalify. I knew I was going to requalify. I knew I was going to do everything I could to make that possible. And, my wife was a rock star throughout this process. She was there. We had just had our first little kiddo, man, Gabriel. He was, just a little over a year. And I didn't know if I was going to be able to walk, run, jump, be a dad the way I was before, let alone be a good service member. I wanted to chase my kid. I wanted to go play sports. I wanted to be an active participant in my life and not rolling around on crutches or a wheelchair in pain 24/7. I don't want someone planning around me. I want to be a part of the story. And ultimately, all of these things happened. And we went off to Walter Reed. My wife retired from the military. I say this all the time. She sacrificed her military career. She was a senior counterintelligence agent in all of U.S. Army Special Operations. And she retired to take care of me, to help me get on my foot, and to take care of Gabe, who was dealing with some gastrointestinal issues and throwing up 8, 10, 12 times a day. And we were going through IUI and IVF at the time, struggling with fertility. And, she did all of that. So I always make this point, man. Women in the military, and I'm sure it's the same in the fire service, they thank their husbands for their service, and they often thank them for serving their husband. And it's hard because you're out there doing everything you can as well. And she did that. She gave it up. And frankly, everything we've been able to accomplish would have been possible if not for that sacrifice. So we're here because of that. We ended up having our second little boy, Colton, through IVF. We would not have him if it weren't for that. And, something for which I'm just incredibly grateful. But at Walter Reed, it took a moment and opportunity. I was doing one-legged box jumps. I was just destroying myself. I'm an older guy. I'm at 18 years of service. Like, I'm old. Everybody else is a baby. And General Ray Odierno, a humongous human being. I mean, 6'5", probably 3 bills, right? Like, huge dude. And you know how it is when someone like that walks behind you, you feel it in your back of your head. You're like, oh, all right. So I pop my headphones off. I turn around and I'm like, all right, all I see is 4 stars because my eyeballs are in his chest, right? Like, all right, let me get my leg on here and figure this out. And he's like, what is your deal, man? What do you mean? You're different than the rest. You're old. 1, 2, what are you doing? Like, you're training differently than everybody else. What are you trying to do? And I explained my story. And you won't hear a lot of people brag about 4-star generals and their follow through on stories, but that dude, man, I will brag on him all day and every day and twice on Sunday. He followed through exactly with what he said. Verbatim. He called the Sergeant Major of the Army, they called our bosses, and they went down the food chain, and all I asked him to do was give me the opportunity to requalify. Because until here, I've been told it wasn't possible, you're too old, you're too close to retirement, they're just going to kick you out and you'll get medically retired. And I said, that's not your choice, man. Let me prove that I can't do my job. If I cannot do my job, don't let me stay. But if I earn it and I can prove that I can do it, then there's no reason I can't do it. And now this is one fight that the next guy's not going to have to fight. So let's do that. And that General Odierno stuck to his guns, man. He gave me the opportunity and made sure that the Army allowed this process. And, we put in the work, man, but you got to be thankful for those people who stand beside you. I never would have expected someone in his position to really spend that time and follow through. I'm very grateful for him and what he did.
Did you ever get any flack from anyone, other soldiers looking at you and saying, what are you trying to prove, man? Just take up.
All the time. All the time. I had people in my own formation, Green Berets, people I love. They're like, dude, what are you doing, man? You've done enough. You've served this much. You've gone to combat. And I always brought it back to the same place. I'm like, I'm not ready to retire. That is not your decision. It is not their decision. If I can do my job, let me do my job.
You ever think that maybe some of the hate, or not hate, but if there was any hate, is that those individuals didn't have the character of you? And that you were setting them up for almost not failure, but like, oh man, if this guy pulls this off, I have to be held to his standard now.
I didn't really think about it from that regard. To be honest with you, honestly, that's probably the first time that's come up in a podcast or conversation. That's an interesting thing. Maybe, I'm sure there's people in our regiment who felt that way. I think a lot of it was they wanted to protect me from myself a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And it was my brothers looking out for me and like, dude, why are you going back to it? Just stop, man. Take a knee, go live your life. I just wasn't ready. I can tell you with my mindset, if I'd been medically retired, I would have driven myself crazy because of the what if. I needed to be able to go through here and retire on my terms when it was time. And I knew I'd overcame this because, man, I don't even know how I could have done that. But it's interesting. I try to look for the good in people and the good approach in what people are saying. And for the most part, I think people were just looking out. There's always those folks who, are maybe looking out for other things or other interests. But I think most people are fairly well intentioned.
I think when you get to your level, there's a level of being all in.
Yeah.
If you don't have it, you don't get to that level. So probably is out of good intention. I think the ones that maybe failed getting to your level are sitting back looking and say, look at this guy. Really? Come on, man. Because they weren't able to pull that off, if you know what I mean. Like they weren't at that caliber of a soldier. And and that's the truth of it. I mean, and that comes from being all in, but it comes from a judge of character. So during those moments before you requalified, what gave you the drive to do that? Like, did you have a mentor that you were looking up to, or was someone that kind of guided you, or was it just from your character, the way you were raised? There's something inside of you saying, I have to do this.
Well, I honestly, I think most of my life, I've kind of done things like I'm being chased, right? Just you're all in or you're not in, right?
Yeah,
it's binary, it's black and white. I didn't need someone to motivate me. I was self-motivated. I wanted to do it. I've got one kiddo, one brand new, and that's all the reasons I need right there. My wife sacrificed her career, and if she's going to give that up, I better darn well make sure that sacrifice was worth it. And I'm carrying my reputation. I'm carrying my family's name. I'm carrying our regiment with me. And if I can win this fight, that means that some other Green Beret down the road won't have to fight this fight because now we've set a precedent and a standard. And that's what we did. There are one-legged Green Berets out there deploying, and it wasn't just me. There was a couple of us going through simultaneously. And, I'm very grateful I had the opportunity because ultimately that's what it was. Right? It was an opportunity to try and be successful and do something that not a lot had done.
Yeah, and you requalified, and then you ultimately went on to serve 5 more years of active duty. That's crazy. How did your wife feel about that? I mean, she's by your side, she retired. When you requalified, that first night you laid in bed after you won that battle within your mind, your body, your soul, you pulled it off. What was that first night laying in bed, if you can remember it, or that moment when you're just like, wow, I really did this?
I got to be honest. I suck at memorializing things like that. And I don't want this to sound crazy, I guess, but I expect to be successful. That's probably one of those things that is hard to define. We're selected for this, we're trained for this, and you distill these thoughts and these traits to an even more profound level within our regiment. And I'll tell you, I was not the biggest, the fastest, the strongest. I was never the most gifted. And frankly, I felt in many regards I was very lucky to be amongst people who I idolized and looked up to, and I'm grateful for their input, truly. And my wife, I think she felt the same way. It's hard to understand, but my wife's wired very similarly. Most couples aren't like that, but we weren't most couples. She, I think, understood that I was going to put the time in, that was the expectation. I know she was proud, but there was work to do.
I think if she wasn't part of the military, such a caliber she was, she probably wouldn't have understood. Maybe she would support you, but she probably wouldn't understand on the level of like that what you're thinking. You're thinking and she's understanding what you're thinking without you even saying it because she's a part of that world. And I think that's right. Important probably to your success and ultimately why you guys are different,
Yeah. No, I think that's spot on.
So 5 years you retire as a first sergeant, right?
Yep.
Now, that first sergeant level, does that come during those 5 years after that?
Yeah, so I had picked up my rank pretty quickly in the military. And when you get injured, you kind of get taken off the merry-go-round a little bit. So I was trying to, time this thing and get back in. And, I still wanted to be a command sergeant major eventually. but I lost a big chunk of time here due to injury and just not following the protocol and the path, if you will. And, things happen. And one of the things that I wanted to hold myself to is I promised people, and I promised the people that I cared about the very most, that when it became hard to do this job, it was time to retire. I would love to have been there, and I picked up first sergeant when I took my last job in the military, and I got to help build and groom the next generation of Green Berets, right? I thought, if this is going to be it and I don't get picked up for anything else, at least I can show them that it doesn't matter if you get shot, you get blown up. You guys have it in you. You have everything you need to get back up and continue to fight. And our regiment will stand beside you. They will give you the opportunity to get back in it. And we're going to invest in you because we believe in you. We believe in what we stand for as a regiment. And we stand by our people. And I think that story was something that needed to be said. And I was in the right point at the right time to help tell that story. And it was a pretty cool way to put a bow on it.
Yeah, I think your story, to package it for that next soldier coming in, the next Green Beret, is that understanding you have to be all in on this. This isn't something where you can kind of love from afar and then have the work-life balance fall in line, and that's a hot topic where I get beat up on that quite a bit, but then you hear stories like yourself where you have to be all in for success, and by being all in is where you make your mistakes. If you're half-assing anything, you're going to avoid mistakes because it allows you to avoid them. Being
That's
all
right.
in, that means you're all in, the good and the bad, up and down, ebbs and tides, like you said in that gunfight.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like the waves come in, the waves go out. The waves come in, the waves go out. Same
That's
with
right.
your career. Like if you're not all in on that gunfight, then you're going to miss the details of it. Like everything in this life, in both of our jobs, I think it comes down to understanding the details, paying attention. I think that is where success comes from. And anything when you're dealing with stress level or anything of success from sports to the fire department to military, being all in and making those mistakes and then talking about them, sharing them, accepting humility, ultimately in the end of success. And your story is exactly that. I mean, your story is tremendous. It's incredible. And I think it's for any young, aspiring firefighter, police officer, military teams guy, if seeing that story, I think that would be a motivator for me, at least, coming into this world of what we've done and what we do. Let's talk a little bit about Operation Barbecue and that relief disaster nonprofit you built in 2011, right?
Yep. Yeah. So I didn't build it. I was a second employee. Stan Hayes and Will Cleaver, they were the co-founders on this. And when I retired, there's always opportunities. I'll be honest, man. I could do a whole 10-hour symposium on military transition and all the thoughts that go in your head and what the heck am I going to do next, right? But
let me ask you something real quick on that. When you retired, were you ready?
Yes and no.
That's
the
something in the
competitor
fire
in me
service we struggle with is like, when do you know it's time to go?
I knew
right?
it was time to go because I was struggling to keep up. I was having to dedicate so much more time to meet the standard. And there's one standard, right? I'm not going to be someone they plan against. Could I have done that? Yes, man. But then everything I've tried to do has been for naught because now we're having a double standard. That's hot garbage. That's part of what's wrong with our country, right? The standard is the standard. And you talk about resiliency and how we have to bake that in. Well, we got to mimic that, right, man? If we're going to have to teach our kids to go kill dragons, let's start giving them dragon slaying skills. But we got to model that, right? Like my biggest skill in life isn't that I'm good at anything innately. It's that I keep getting up, man. You can't break someone who's unbreakable. I will get back up no matter what until my last breath. That is just how I'm wired. And that, I think, is the American story. That's where all of us come from, man. Right?
Yeah, I mean, that's how my old man, like, growing up watching my father, 7 days a week he's at work. My grandfather,
right.
7 days a week. And when he retired, he come help my dad work, family business type stuff. And
Yep.
that's what I've always seen. I've seen that, and I'm wired to be all in. And I think that's, again, like you said, what's wrong with this nation. And it's ultimately, unfortunately, bleeding into our worlds. And it's slowly destroying what we've loved and what we built so hard to create. And that came from the brothers that came long, long before us, right?
Yep.
And their legacy and the standards that they have built. I feel it's our due diligence to keep those standards up. And your story, again, tremendous because there was a standard set. You were dealt a really, really bad hand, and you still won the poker. You took the kitty home, and you retired 5 years after that. But getting back to your Operation Barbecue, I want to hear a lot about this, actually. So go on with that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, man. So, never would have imagined I would have been into barbecue and natural disasters after I got done doing the military thing. Many people in that arena go work for the agency or go do those things, right? And I had those opportunities. But, man, it was nonprofits that really struck me when I was in Walter Reed. It was nonprofits, people I'd never met from a part of the country I hadn't spent a lot of time in, came in there and, man, they were like, hey, we're here for you. You want to go do this? We're going to be here for you and your family. You want to go run marathons? Let's do it. Janet's one of the nicest human beings on God's green earth, and she came in there and was like, hey, friend, would you like to go run marathons? I'm like, lady, I don't even have a leg. Like, stop. And she just kept coming back, right? Those people change your mentality because all of us are going to fall victim to a little bit of a PMS, right? Poor me syndrome. And I did. There were days when I was frustrated. I was upset. I didn't feel like I was making the headway. And I felt sorry for myself. And people with good attitudes said, hey, that's all right. It's a tough day. Get up, keep moving, and, refocus on what's ahead of you. And it's easy to be resilient when you have people who are maximizing your resiliency, when you have people who are resilient. And with OBR, I had requalified. It was my last job. And, in that schoolhouse, we were trying to do things for our service members and their families. And this nonprofit popped up out of nowhere and said, hey, look, we want to feed people that work for you. We want to thank them, and we're going to feed them these awesome meals. We're part of whatever you want us to do, no charge. That's pretty awesome, right? I actually met them when I was at a speaking engagement. And one of their volunteers told me about it. I gave him a card. He called us. They put it together, and they showed up. And I was like, wow, awesome. They came back a few months later, and I had just filed my retirement paperwork. And I said, hey, look, I'll be leaving here in the next few months. This person will be my replacement. They'll be stepping up. And they said, hey, you ever thought about coming into the nonprofit sector? Nah, not really. Tell me about it, right? And we started talking, and they wanted me to step in and build their non-disaster things, giving back to veterans, military, and first responders. But most importantly, their family, man. You got to take care of the family with the people, right? It's a family unit. And we went back and forth, and eventually I took the job, right? It was, I joke about it, the lowest paying job that I thought would make the biggest difference to people around me. And I came in to not do disaster work, but to give back to veterans. So, we wanted to launch that in the biggest way possible. So I said, let's do something bold. We ran a bike across America, 3,000 miles in 50 days. We fed 100,000 people hot meals. We went from the West Coast to the East Coast and into Tampa thereafter and ran the torch into the stadium, opened up the Warrior Games in Tampa, and then I competed for Team SOCOM. And we just kept doing more and more, man. And it was pretty awesome. I never thought I'd be doing barbecue, let alone running across the country like that. It was like Johnny Appleseed with brisket, right? Out there planting barbecue seeds.
Yeah.
But, man, it was amazing. And I think this is really where you're seeing the groundwork laid for politics. Because we saw a commonality, no matter where you went in the country, man, a lot of the things we've been talking about, man, it still exists. It does. We just don't talk about it. People are afraid to show love for their nation. They're afraid to show pride. They're afraid to be who they are because, in some circles, it's frowned upon to be a dominant male, or it's frowned upon to be overly aggressive in sports and fight to win and play to win and do all these things. And, that's who we are, man. People are competitors. And it was great to see commonalities across the country, whether it was Skid Row in LA, Phoenix, San Antonio, El Paso, Houston, Hammond, Louisiana, up in the panhandle of Florida or in Tampa. They were the same. People were the same. They were Americans. And we did this. Eventually, I had more opportunity to do more with the organization. So ultimately, I work now a lot like the COO. I'm responsible for what we do day to day in disaster and non-disaster. And I can tell you, I'm really excited. We have a camp in Lake of the Ozarks focused specifically on giving back to those who serve our community. It's 190 acres. We've got about a mile of waterfront. And we do all the fun stuff, the hunting, fishing, boating, shooting, but it's wrapped around food. Food is a commonality in every community, every country, every culture. When you got skinned up as a kid, what happened, man? Your mom fed you, right? When someone died, they fed you. When you met someone new or was at a wedding, they fed you. When you told stories and you had holidays, they came together around food. We are hardwired for food to be a catalyst for building relationships. And what better way to talk to warriors from all three of those areas than doing this over barbecue, over brisket. And what we do, honestly, is culinary therapy at this camp. We sit down, we throw meat on the grill, we teach them how to do this, we tell stories, we build bridges, and we build networks for these folks. And ultimately, what we find is you see a lot of growth because they're talking to people who are like them, who talk like them, think like them, and have overcome similar injuries and problems. And they understand the guilt they went through when they were harming their family in their minds because they weren't able to be all there physically. You know, all of these things, you know, we can talk about there. This is such a great healing space for our people. What I love about this is it also provides people the opportunity to continue to serve. As a member of the military, and I know it's the same way in fire service, dude, I did that because I believe in something bigger than myself. I want to serve. I want to be a part of a team. I want to leave things better than I got it. When I got injured, you wouldn't believe the amount of people who are like, hey, you get this, you get that. We're going to take care of you. No, don't try to do the hard things. Take the easy road and we'll take care of you. I don't want to be taken care of, man. I take care of other people. I serve people. That's who I am. That is my heart. That is my spirit. That is my soul. And when you take that away from people, you take away everything that they are. So what we want is we want to give people a new opportunity to serve their communities this way. So we go out and we do feed people after natural disasters. We can do really up to about 100,000 hot meals per day and maintain that for up to 30 days. Those are some pretty obscene numbers when you think about it. That's a lot of pulled pork and brisket. And we want veterans to come in there and be the local face on their local community. We want fire and law enforcement to do the same thing. It's neighbors helping neighbors, man. That's what the foundation of this nation is about. That's where America is at its best. And we just afford people a new opportunity to do what they've always done and serve and lead and leave things better than they got it. You won't believe how powerful it is to go into a community with a barbecue sandwich and a meal and hand this to someone who's lost everything, and you watch them break down because they haven't eaten in a day or a day and a half, and their whole life has been ripped apart. But in that moment, man, you're making everything a little bit better, and it's because of food. Again,
neighbors helping neighbors, exactly what you just said. And then that common denominator is food. Even in the firehouse, it's like, you come visit my firehouse someday. We're gonna make you a nice lunch. You're gonna have a meal with us. We're gonna sit down and we're gonna break bread together because that's what brothers do. That's what neighbors do. That's what families do. And you're bringing that to every place that needs that has that absence of that, or that loss over a tragedy or a natural disaster. Man, you, like I said, you're all in from whatever you're doing, from
yes,
military, from football, military to the barbecue, and then in 2022, the state senate, and now you're a senator again. So the nation's very, very lucky to have you. The barbecue relief is very happy to have you, and I'm sure Florida, and I know for a fact Florida is extremely lucky to have you, because I know that within politics, especially Florida, it is a team, and you have built a really, really good team around that state, and you're doing great things for so many people. So where can we find you if we want to get in touch with you, if you want to support the barbecue?
Yeah. No, I appreciate that question. So if you want to support OBR, you can go to www.obr.org. You can go on social media and type in Operation Barbecue Relief. Kind of a crazy name, but what we do is food making a difference in people's lives. You can go to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I think we're on TikTok as well, LinkedIn. All of your socials are out there. But for sure, go to our website. You can download our app in the App Store on Android or Apple. And if you download this and upload it, it'll tell you if there's opportunities in your community to serve. It'll ping you and let you know when there's a disaster, if we need help, or if there's a veteran or first responder event or something like that going on in your community. And then on the Senate side, you can reach out. I'm going to give you my phone number right here. My cell phone is 813-576-8068. Now, you're not going to see that a whole lot, but in the end, I can't solve what I don't know, so you're welcome to text me or call me. That's a fact. I want to leave things better, but it takes you telling me what's not working for us to fix it. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I'm out there on LinkedIn as well. And it's J Collins FL is my handle on those things. But reach out to us. Ultimately, I am not a politician. I am a Green Beret. I'm my father's son, and I'm trying to be a better dad each day. That ultimately is what this is about, man. And I think there's a lot of commonality in that.
For sure, man. So, Senator Collins, thank you so much. And you're an inspiration to me. I know that this conversation really opened up my eyes to so many things. And I'm sure everyone listening really, if you take away anything, it's about just real resilience, loyalty, having a sense of humility, but ultimately being American and being a patriot is what we have to bring back to this nation. And gentlemen like you are doing that. So thank you, Jay, for coming on.
Brother, it's a privilege. Thank you for what you do. I can't say thank you enough.
All right. Thanks, bro.
Thank you.